Now let's display the users that we can send direct messages to in our direct messages component. I'll head to direct messages. And the first thing we need here is the current user data, which we'll get from the parent component, the side panel. So we'll pass current user down as a prop to direct messages. Once we have the current user data, we'll put it in our state as the user property. When our component mounts, we're going to check to see that we have some user data, that it's not null. If so, we'll call a function called addListeners and pass the user UID to it. So we'll create this addListeners function, which takes the current user UID, and it's going to collect all of the users that aren't the currently authorized authenticated user. We'll first import Firebase from Firebase and add the user's ref to state. So we'll first create an empty array called loaded users. We'll take the user's ref and listen for any new children that are added. And within the snap callback, we'll check to see that the current user UID is not equal to snap.key. This is because we don't want to include within our loaded users array ourselves, the currently authenticated user. We'll create a user variable be equal to the value of the snap, and we'll add a couple of properties. The first being the UID property, which will be equal to snap.key, and the status of the user, which will initially be set to offline. Then we'll take each of these user objects, push it onto the loaded users array, then put it within local state with set state onto the users property. Then underneath our users ref, we'll add this connected ref. This is a ref which will give us information about the user's status as to whether they are connected or not. And we'll use this connected ref, which gives us some meta information about each user in our app, to listen for a change in the value. So if there's a value change for a given user with the connected ref, we're going to update a new collection that we'll create in our database called presence. And presence will consist of an array of user IDs and a value of true. So this name and value pair, a user's UID and the value true, will be set only if the user is online, to indicate their presence within the app. So this is how we'll track the user's online status as well as their offline status. So if snap.value equals true, if there is a value change for a given user on the connected ref, we'll first add the presence ref to state, referencing Firebase Database ref with the string of preference. We're going to take the presence ref and we'll add a child to it with the current user UID. And we'll call this value ref and set it to true. So we'll set the value of that to true. Then we'll also add this onDisconnect method in the case that if our user disconnects from the app, we'll remove it with the remove method and catch any errors in the process. So now that we're tracking the user's online status with the presence ref, underneath we'll take it and listen for the child added event. So if there's a new child added, a new user is added to our presence ref that has the value of true, and the UID is not equal to snap.key once again, we're going to add a status to the user. And we'll do that with a function But we'll first copy this and paste it in right underneath and listen for the child removed event. So we want to listen for when a child is added and a child is removed to the presence ref, and we'll create our add status to user function. This will take a user ID and a connected value, which by default will be set to true. We'll create a variable called updated users, where we'll go through the users array with the reduce method, which has an accumulator, and will iterate over each user value. And we'll check to see if the user UID is equal to user ID, as well as if a connected value, if connected is passed a value of true. If so, we're going to put the status of the user as online. If not, we'll make them offline. Then we'll concatenate each user back onto the accumulator, and then set the state. We'll set the users array with the updated users array. Then within the child added event, this conditional that we set up for when a child is added to the presence ref, we'll execute add status to user and pass the snap.key, and when a child is removed, we'll set the connected argument to false, indicating that our user is not connected and that we should give them a status of offline. And finally, within our menu, we'll iterate over the users, we'll map over them, and all the user data will be within the menu item component. The key will be user.uid, set up an onClick, where for now we'll just console log the user data. We'll set the style of the menu item, its opacity to 0.7, and the font style to italic. And within the menu item, we'll have an icon with the name of circle. In this circle, we'll show the status of the user, whether they're online or offline, with a color. So the color will execute this function, is user online. We'll run is user online, and if it returns true, we'll give the icon a color of green, otherwise a color of red to indicate that they're offline. So is user online will take the user, we'll check the user status to see if it's the text online. If it's true, once again we'll have a color of green. Then underneath the icon, we'll just interpolate the username with user.name. So now if we head back to our app and we refresh, in our direct messages we should see another user in our app that's not ourselves, that we can send direct messages to, and on our presence ref we should see one value of true, which is us, the currently authenticated user.